you've got this thing called ADHD. What does it mean?
It's both a blessing and a curse. It means you can't tread the line. You're either hot, you're cold.
At what point did you converge and become a director?
That's a very good question, and the last 13 years seems like a blur. So at what point that happened?
Somewhere in the last 13 years.
Yeah.
Oz Hetherington, director of 1101 here in Sheffield. Welcome to Business Unlimited. Great to have you with us. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. Got to know you a little bit over the last couple of years and just the amazing way in which your brain works, which I want to draw out.
Yeah. So, and I hate it when people go, yeah, so, because it means they're absolutely thinking about what they're going to say. So in 1992, 1993, my parents got an Ambra Sprinter 386, beast of a machine, and a bubble jet printer, if you remember bubble jet printers. And I was just like, wow, what is this? Can I use this? But I've always been known in the family for taking things apart and like analysing them. How do they work? There's in my room when I was growing up, there's bits of irons, bits of kettles, like, looking at the bimetallic strips and this it was always very interesting for me to build and be part of technology. I was a bit of a trouble child, and I think characteristics around ADHD and things like that were less understood back then. My grandfather sort of sponsored me into that. My parents said, well, we need a bit more than the sort of mainstream schools can offer in identification. So I passed the exams to get into Stanford, and I was sponsored by my grandfather in there, and worked through IT and things like that, and was really excited, still excited about technology, anything to do with the design technology, anything to do with computers, moving parts. I did really well in my GCSEs because of the setting. But then moved on from there to got a qualification with Cisco, CCNA, by the time I was 18, because they ran it in sixth form, and I did that with maths, physics, advanced maths, AS. But because of the setting, my qualifications and the structure sort of set out. But anyway, and I was there and I studied computer networks for business. Now, what was really interesting about that was we're doing the networking and the geeky stuff and making websites. No offense to anybody that can hear this. We were making, I'm a big geek here now, but we were making websites as part of that. We were doing digital photography as part of the course. But we were also doing business studies, and that was really interesting, like Mintzberg, Hertzberg, all of these theories around business and what they are and what they do. We had a really good lecturer, and I still follow him on LinkedIn now. His name's Ian Stewart. When I sit down with somebody, I'm like imagining how the process flows all work. Why are they doing that? I can challenge them on that and often be outside of the business. But I did that. Then I was elected to a university president for 2 years, probably a bit like Van Wilder. Didn't really want to exit into the real world, was having too much of a nice time with nice people, still very inspired.
So there was a business brain developing at that point.
Yeah, and I was around people like trustees that were, multimillionaire, people that had retired, made it, or public figures on that board. There was 24 members on the board, and I was really looking at them and analysing the questions that they were sort of asking and going, well, why are they asking that? And there were some people there that were just going with the flow, getting on from the student union. I didn't want to go home and live at home in Peterborough. That's where I grew up. I didn't want to live at home, loved my parents and everything, but this sense of independence. So I moved up with my best friend who was in Sheffield already. But I really did want a job. I went for an interview and just chased it down consistently every few days. And eventually they gave me a job. And I worked for a company called Applied Language Solutions, which was a company run by a chap called Gavin Wheeldon. Gavin Wheeldon was on Dragon's Den around translation services, and he eventually sold out to Capita. And I wasn't there when they sold out to Capita, but I did 18 months there, and all I wanted to do was make sales. Didn't really understand it, but I wanted to make sales. So I was hitting the phones. Of call times, I'd be on the phone 3-4 hours a day consistently trying to get leads. It was more like throwing stuff at the wall at that point. rather than really understanding the process. I had some great training from Pareto, which I was, the hook, the top, the tap, which I take with me now. And yeah, so worked in translation services all the way through for 18 months, then became global sales manager for Adelphi when I got bored of traveling an hour there and an hour back every day. And so CV was handed across to a company called MCI for Service, MCI Daventi. I went and interviewed. I put together a presentation there. We had 2 stages, went to meet them, and then they wanted a presentation on my approach to developing business. And I remembered I used a milk analogy. I had, a milk, semi-skimmed, full fat, skimmed. And the point of the slide was, as long as you've got a suite of products, you've got something for everybody, and there'll be some people that just don't drink milk, but at least you've got your options. And that's something that I've carried forwards today, and I've always carried forwards. But eventually got the job in MCI Daventi. And one of the directors at the time just wanted me to get on the phones and hammer the phones. And so I was calling people in that you would know, like Prior Market Technology, SIG. I was calling them, trying to sort of, I guess, flog them hardware and software, just stuff. And I was sitting upstairs in this building for 2 weeks, and the director was just watching everything that everybody was doing. Like, he would sit at the front like a schoolmaster. After 2 weeks, the other director, who had a different responsibility, was kind of like, and this is Mike, who you've met, it was like, you need to work downstairs, because then I was amongst the team. And I understood. And then I was like, oh, we sell support services. Right, got it. Bang, bang, bang. Here we go. The company was MCI for Service. Was a company that was born out of MCI Daventi, and one of our directors, Marvin Miller. Mike and Marvin met at BNI, and they created this entity. Now, Marvin's very good at technical, but not the sales element of it. So MCI Daventi were funding this venture. And I remember this moment very well. Within 3 to 4 weeks of me being there, a friend of mine that I'd sort of said, you work in this organisation, I can do this, we can do this for you, are you interested? He said, yeah, actually we'd need this. I said, right, okay, brilliant. Got the account application set up. I'd already generated a few sales by this point. And that was in the sort of like the first 2 to 3 weeks, which is great, making a good impression, believe. This is what I really want to do. Yeah, the thrill of the chase. And he rang me up and he said, we've just processed your supplier application. Did you know that you've got a risk of foreclosure on the business you're working in? I'm like, nope, because I'm at this point, I think I'm like 28, I think, as an age. I'm sitting there going, oh God, that's not good. So brain thinks in very quickly, how do I tackle this? How do we get round this so that the business that I'm working in, that I'm responsible for, I've got no promise of like managing director or general manager at this point in time. It's just a job. I just turn around and sort of think, how do we work this one? Well, we've got the sister company, MCI Daventi. I said, what if we apply under MCI Daventi and supply through Daventi? And so he said, I think we can do that. So we got that filled out, passed. First sale of the business, 250,000 into it there. Turned that business around, profitability of like 60% on the thing. Wiped off the outstanding debt.
And that's where
to the
you met
sister
Marvin
company.
and Mike, who are your co-directors now.
Correct.
In 1101. So
Correct.
that's where it really started.
So that first sale really helped us to clear what was owed to Daventi, and leapfrog from there.
And it set the tone for where the distinct skill sets were between you, Marvin, and Mike, I suppose, to some extent.
Yeah, exactly. We bring everything different to the table, and I've always driven. I've always been driven for the next thing. I drive my wife mad, but she said to me last night, we sat there Thursday night, we have wine on Thursday night, it's a ritual. Usually my son swims. We have wine and we'll sit down and watch something or we'll have a chat. And she turned around and went, "When will it ever end?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, you're always doing something. You don't sit still," which is really interesting based on the DISC assessment, isn't it? That I'm restless. I've got a lot of energy to do these things. I guess that's where I've started from, all the way to now. There's been some bumps and things, well,
And
quite
you've
sizable
alluded
bumps.
to your ADHD brain.
Yeah.
What I mean, people, it's a cliche, but people call that a superpower. And I think sometimes they don't even understand what that means. But just unpack that a little in terms of, there's a characteristic there in terms of restlessness. But that might not be like everybody's ADHD. So for you, how are you as Oz, but you've got this thing called ADHD? What does it mean?
It's both a blessing and a curse. It means you can't tread the line. You're either hot, you're cold. It's a really interesting thing to tackle once you kind of go through that process. You kind of go, right, okay, I can't do that because I'm not interested in it. It's a real blocker, if there's no excitement, or you put things and you build this mountain out of a molehill rather than getting started. So often what you'll find is people with ADHD struggle to get started if there's
Because
not
they've
an
built
enjoyment.
up the starting in their mind
Yeah.
to the point where it becomes a blockage. Is
Yeah.
that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I've developed something with the team, an acronym, which is JFDI. I won't say what it means, but someone turns around to me and I'll say JFDI, like, why are we here? What's the worst that can happen? So if I can do lots of things at once, I can also move at pace, and that in itself,
There's a strength and a weakness. You know as well as I do that partly the success of business is consistency, discipline, and repeating the right things. When I say it like that, does that come across as dull and boring or necessary for growth? So how do you get the balance right of doing things repetitively that are necessary and that discipline against the shiny new object syndrome?
I'm still learning. I think that's the honest answer. I'm absolutely still learning. I have Mondays and Fridays in the office. I'm in the office, or they are my rest days, if you like. So I'm in the office around to support people if they need me. The kind of leader I guess I am is, if people want help, I want them to come to me. I don't want to be chasing people
And
But
that's a culture, isn't it? You have to grow that culture for people to know that they can come to you. So, bit of context then on 1101. Mike, who you met originally, as you said in that previous context, with Marvin, the original founder of 1101. It's 1101.co.uk is the website. At what point did you converge and become a director?
Right. That's a very good question. And the last 13 years seems like a blur. So at what point that happened?
Somewhere in the last
It
13
happened.
years.
Yeah, it just happened.
So were you an employee?
Yeah.
And then you became a director?
So the route was employee, technical services manager, and then general manager with 10% shares in the business, which were given to me by Marvin. At that point in time, he gave up his shares for me. The business turned around. I think Mike turned around and said, "We're not going to keep this guy unless we give him some sort of
stakeholdership.
incentive to do it." And we went out to Zoigma 2s on London Road.
Heard of it, yeah.
And they went, "Right, we want you to be general manager and we're going to give you 10% in the business." Oh, wow. Don't even know what this means, but it sounds great. I'm still very immature in my business understanding at that point, given the fact that I'd been at university for 6 years. And so by the age 25, that's when I really started, 26 is where I really started my professional career in sales. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. Right. What do I do with it? I'm like, well, you just keep on doing some things, keep growing the business.
Learn as you go.
Learn. Yeah. And that, there was a very open kind of, you're doing something and you're doing it well, crack on, and there was guidance from Mike along the way, which allowed me to make mistakes.
Some risk-taking culture.
Which was brilliant. And then at some point, it got tricky. with it just got tricky. And
Would you say that was relational or technical or market? What was the core of that trickiness?
the trickiness was a shared understanding of ability to move forwards
Right.
with all the shareholders
Yeah, and all the moving parts by then.
and all the moving
And just
parts.
give us a sense of scale it had arrived at by that point in time.
Well, so we had got to about 12 seats,
Yeah.
as an organisation, and MCI Daventi, due to the market and other bits and pieces, went under.
Yeah.
They owed us money,
Right.
and they brought people in to manage the business, who didn't manage the business, unfortunately, and it was a little bit too late when that happened, and you know,
That must have been tough for Mike.
very tough for Mike because he trusted
Yeah.
other people, and as you can see, trusted me, trusted other people, and when what's being reported to you and things like that is correct, he had to pick those pieces up. It was I think it was a 2 to 3 month process where he had to try and work out what they were going to do with the business. And in the end, he just turned around to the other person and said, "It's not going to work. We have to we have to put the company into
not easy.
liquidation." Which is
And the danger then
tough.
is that creates muscle memory, and that has the danger of projecting into a trusted future growth strategy.
Yeah, it does. But what I will say is, if anything, it made my co-director Mike very emboldened.
Yeah.
To make the next thing work.
Great. Where does it go? What does growth look like from here on in?
Tough. No, challenging, but a good challenge. I'm really excited. People in the right seats, doing the right thing, understanding their role. The next layer of growth is empowerment of our senior management team.
Yeah.
That's it. We've brought in a very capable business development manager because all the sales have been on me. We've got a good engagement function. We've got a great operational function, a great finance function, that we need to let and encourage and nurture to grow. If we can do that, it means I can sort of achieve that thing that for my in my personal goal, if you like, is choice. If you were to say, what is it? Liberty, eh?
That's one of my
Whose
values.
values is that? Yeah. So having the freedom for me and my family to do what we want, that's not saying disconnect from the business. That's not saying leave our partners high and dry that buy into.
But it allows
what's
you
been
to
driven by
creatively
me.
express who you are as well, doesn't it?
Oh, 100%. 100%. We'd like to go on holiday to Centre Parks during non-term time. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah,
Let's
that's
do it.
That's freedom.
Let's
really.
do 4 activities a
I
day.
always say wealth is what's left when the money's gone.
Right.
Because really it's holistic what you're talking about. It's not just about money. Money is time and time is money, but it's about lifestyle, isn't it?
It's experiences for my kids. My parents worked really hard to give me experiences that I would have never otherwise had. And I know that that's quite they had good like ski trips and stuff along the way. And I had I would say I had a very more than average upbringing as an individual, and I'm really thankful for that to my parents, and I want to aspire to do that for my children, for my wife, so that we have that choice, and the business is a vehicle to do that,
which a lot of business people lose sight of because it feels like the business is taking them in directions they don't necessarily want to go, but remembering that it's supposed to be there to give you the life that you started it in the first place for. And it's just remembering that sometimes. It's to serve your personal goals, isn't it? Rather than the other way around. Fascinating to hear some of the business insights that you've shared in this conversation. Just to bring it into land, what have you learned about yourself through that journey? If you're honest with yourself, what have you learned that's good, that's positive? You've probably learned some things that you didn't like about yourself, but have moved on. What have you learned about yourself?
I think there's 2 things. There's 2 things that I've learned about myself. One is like my fear and anxiety are often the dominant feelings. Not ideal in decision making. And the other So just pausing, having to pause and slow down mitigates
And reflect what's
and
going
reflect.
in.
And flip that anxiety, for instance, you lose customers. Everyone loses customers. Don't take it personally. And the customers that we lose are either because they've gone bust.
But where it all starts is with some self-awareness, some reflection on the data that your emotions are telling you, and then being able to look from the outside in and say, is that helpful? Is that going to serve me if I make a decision based on those emotions? But so it sounds like you're gaining that self-awareness to recognize what the right context is for you to make a decision.
Yeah, I think it's acknowledging the triggers. And I think and people that are listening to this or watching this will maybe understand this is dry mouth, achy jaw.
What about a knot in your stomach?
Don't get the knot in my stomach.
Okay.
It's more around here. Don't want to eat.
Yeah.
That's, there's been some, during that time when everything was going to be all right, I was up night crying at like 2:00 in the, feeling so lonely in that situation that I invested all this time in something that was going to give me choice and give my wife choice.
And it looked exactly the opposite at that point.
Although she wasn't my wife at the time, that happened, and 4 months later we were getting married.
Wow.
So that's quite excessive.
Yeah.
Read those noises
Sure.
as you will.
But, the cliche is, oh, yeah, how did you sleep last night? Like a baby. Woke up every 2 hours crying. It sounds like that's exactly what the experience was like. But learning a lot from that. And if you are now looking back through all of that and speaking back to the 18-year-old version of yourself that's about to embark on life, what sage, wise advice would you be giving yourself?
Minimum viable implementation of anything you do in short chunks. Then you achieve stuff, and you can go, there you go. Like, that would be it. Just don't take anything personally. It's not about you. It's about what that situation is. So don't be emotional. I have and I need to get back to it, but I have found that I use a Remarkable, and I can't shut off. Every night it's like stopping at some point in the day and using the Remarkable to just write what you're thankful for on that day puts into context, even though that, like, yesterday, let's use an example. So I thought journaling was nonsense until I did it, and actually it was a weight lifted. At the end of the day, yesterday we received some news that one of our clients was in a bit of a financial crisis, and we weren't able to continue together. And usually that would be like, oh, that's terrible, and I'd be like, right, how do we balance that? Where do we get that? How do we replace that, etc., etc. But instead, the mindset was like, I've had a really, really good session with the other directors on alignment, and I can start seeing other bits and pieces that we could be doing to move the business forwards. Then just that element of reflection and being thankful for that changed the whole mindset. Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about that, but that's gone from like 80% to like 20%.
And that's all about your perspective, which you're in control of, which is great advice.
We've got great people. We've got a large war chest in the bank that Mike has built over time because of previous. So, whatever happens, we need to be pushing forwards
and enjoy the journey.
Yeah. Give it a go. And today is Friday, which means that it may or may not be Shawarma Friday in our office, which the team get very jealous about. So there's definitely a higher attendance on a Friday in the office if they know I'm going to be in.
Sounds like there needs to be a themed day every day of the week then to maintain that.
I'm not sure the war chest would survive.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Oz Hetherington, co-director of 1101, so good to have you in the studio with us. It's been fascinating listening to you. Some great stories, some great insights, both of yourself and from the business as well. And of course, anybody listening that describes themselves as having ADHD will have probably learned some things from you as well. So that's an added bonus. So really appreciate you coming to the studio.
Thanks, Tim.